Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Baum. We acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us here today. Today's Last Post ceremony tells the story of an Aboriginal soldier as part of National Reconciliation Week, which runs from the 27th of May to the 3rd of June. These two dates mark important milestones in Australia's journey to reconciliation. On the 27th of May 1967, the Australian public voted overwhelmingly to change the Constitution to include Aboriginal people in the census and to allow the Commonwealth to create laws for them. And on the 3rd of June 1992, the High Court of Australia made the historic Mabo decision, which acknowledged Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people's unique connection to the land. In commemorating the service of Private Frank Richard Archibald, we recognise those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander servicemen and servicewomen who have played their part in walking the path to reconciliation. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have served in every conflict and commitment involving Australian Defence contingents since Federation, including both World Wars. They came from a section of society with few rights, low wages, and poor living conditions. But once in the AIF, they were treated as equals, paid the same as other soldiers, and generally accepted without prejudice. Despite their courage and commitment to fighting for a nation that afforded them second-class status, most came back to much the same discrimination as before. By telling their stories, we hope to come to an understanding of the depth of their sacrifice and dedication, which will in no small way illuminate the path to reconciliation. A shared history of service and commitment will unite, not divide. We warmly welcome the family of Private Frank Richard Archibald, whose story will be told shortly. And joining me today from the Australian Army is Sapper Nariah Vale, a Gumbaynggirr man and a great-nephew of Private Frank Archibald. We also welcome representatives from Defence Indigenous Affairs who are joining us here this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and by visitors to the memorial. But before we hear the story of Private Frank Richard Archibald, Wing Commander Jonathan Lilly, a Warramai man, will now play the Frank Archibald songline didgeridoo, also known as Yidaki. The Yidaki is not traditionally played in Ngunnawal country. It is played here today with the permission of the Ngunnawal peoples to acknowledge and pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men and women who have contributed to the defence of Australia in times of peace and war. Thank you, Wing Commander Lilly. If you are able, would you please stand and join in singing the National Anthem? Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Frank Richard Archibald. Frank Archibald was born on the 17th of February, 1950, in Walcha, New South Wales, the son of Frank and Sarah Archibald. Frank was the eldest son of 13 children. He was elected the successor of the Gumbaynggirr peoples, whose land stretched along the Pacific coast from the Nabaka River in the south to the Clarence River in the north and the Great Dividing Range in the west. Frank Archibald lived in Armidale, Walcha until 1935, when the family moved to Burnt Bridge Mission in Kempsey. The family had reportedly moved to the mission from authorities threatened to move their children. The government authorities promised that the children would move with the family if they had moved to the mission. Frank Archibald enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Kempsey, May 1940, at the age of 25. Frank was assigned to the reinforcement of the 2nd Infantry Battalion, a part of the 16th Brigade and the 6th Division. His younger brother, Reynold, and his cousin, Richard, also enlisted around the same time. After some training at Greta, a small town in the Hunter region, in August, Archibald was granted leave from embarking in Sydney for an overseas service. After they reached Palestine in September, training continued until the 2nd Battalion advanced from Egypt to eastern Libya. In January and February 1941, Archibald and his comrades were taken in towards the attacks that captured the Bana and Tobruk. They remain as part of the Tobruk garrison, and the advance continued. The 2nd left Tobruk, arriving in Greece late March, developed north in the resistance to the anticipation of German invasion. A succession of Allied withdrawals meant the battalion did not see battle until April 18th. In a desperate fight, the 2nd blocked German movement to permit the safe withdrawal of Allied forces further south, holding its ground until overwhelming and vastly superior German forces. During the evacuation, Frank was reportedly in a group of 12, cut off by the German army. The group made their way to the coast by obtaining a fishing boat they took to Crete. In March 1942, Archibald and the men of his battalion began making their way home. Their voyage involved in a detour via Ceylon. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill wanted the Australian 16th and 17th battalions to bolster the British defences in the area. But the Australian government finally ordered the troops back home to defend Australia. Japanese forces had landed on Gona and the northern coast of Papua New Guinea and pushed into the south village of Kokoda. Arriving in Melbourne on the 14th of August 1942, a few weeks later, Frank Archibald, known as his mates as Dickie, was welcomed to a Kempsey by his community at a public function. After a brief trip home, Archibald arrived at the shores of Port Moresby on the 21st of September 1942. His battalion fought major engagements at Templeton's Crossing, Ove, and ascended an arid track, suffering heavy casualties in the process. Having started the campaign with almost 700 personnel, by the time the battalion fought its last actions in December 1942, it had an effective strength of below 100, with many of the men having evacuated due to sickness. Frank's brother Reynold had become ill with malaria and had been evacuated. But Frank continued, noting in his letters that he used his bush skills to help his fellow soldiers collect water. On the 24th of November 1942, the battalion was in the process of securing Santa Ana when they encountered a group of Japanese soldiers dug in along the tracks. Under intense fire, the commander made a decision to split the platoon, leaving one group to engage the enemy while the rest of the platoon moved forward. Frank was in the group engaging the enemy when he noticed one of his friends was caught in a dangerous position. As he was trying to save his friend, he was shot and killed. He was 27 years old. Initially buried near where he fell, his remains later re-entered in Port Moresby at the War Cemetery. On Anzac Day 2012, members of the Archibald family gathered at the cemetery to call Frank's spirit home in a traditional spiritual ceremony. Soil was also taken from his gravesite and re-entered with the family at the Armidale Cemetery. His name is listed on the honour roll to my left, along with almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Frank Richard Archibald, who gave his life for us, for our freedom, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we are the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.